Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about the Pitt Season 1 Episode 15. It is 9 PM. Spoilers for the episode as always. It is the season finale and this is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you very much to Alison for making the pick. So I was curious how this was going to wrap up actually, because it felt like a lot of the bigger, more dramatic elements had kind of dialed down a little bit over the course of the last episode. And I think the idea of bookending this, where the ending is effectively just the end of a shift at work, and it's just everyone kind of packing up and going home, and most of the main characters get like a little goodbye on their own to some extent. Some of them get kind of a big scene together, some have like a little moment on their own or with a side character related to them. But most people get some kind of goodbye that's fairly clean. A couple are less clean. I think Langdon in particular has kind of a heated discussion with Robbie, and that's kind of the last time we see him, to leave him in this place of uncertainty, which I think makes sense because they want us to be wondering, is he going to be around? Is he still going to be a doctor? Is Robbie going to actually report him before next season kind of thing? So I get why his is a little less clean. It makes sense. And Collins never came back. Now, I know that she's not going to be back in season 2. I saw just like a headline about that at some point. I don't know if that was something they'd decided by the time they were wrapping up this season, and that's why she never came. But it felt weird she never came back. It felt weird she never came back for the crisis. And there's no mention of her on like this episode or even the last episode. So it just kind of felt a bit like, oh, okay, I guess she's gone for the day. Her phone's turned off. She never got a call to come back and help out with the mass casualty. But anyway, to dive into it, it's almost like I want to talk more about the characters and how they end their stories more so than I do the medical stuff this episode. I guess the two big medical things, though, just to get them out of the way quickly, is one, someone comes in with their pelvis crushed, and there's a lot of procedures with that. The main thing, though, during that sequence is that Robbie is kind of a little out of it and not, like, he was kind of freezing a little bit in the moment, shall we say. And the performance here for him was very good. I think Noah Weil has been good all season. I think there's a couple of key moments in this episode where he gets a lot to do, but he also makes a lot of little subtle moments. Particularly that scene with Langdon, I thought there was a good moment where he was kind of like feeling challenged, and he was kind of like, what did I see? What did it look like? What did it look like when he's, basically he gets defensive about someone catching him having his moment of weakness. And the idea that Langdon knows about his moment of weakness is maybe the worst person in a sense to him, because he's the one who he has the high ground on in a way. Not that he's being petty per se, I don't really mean that, but just this idea that he's trying to be the authoritative figure in this relationship right now, and Langdon's trying to weaponize a weakness back against them. And not that he's even doing that in a super malicious way, he's kind of appealing to him in a sense of, hey, I messed up, I get that, but it's not like you're running perfectly right now either. Like, we all have our faults here, can you get me some slack? And it gets heated, of course, and he tells him to F off by the end of the scene. But yeah, so one was the pelvis thing, and that's kind of going on throughout the episode. And the other one is the teenager that was set up last episode who had the measles, and the mother who was adamant she didn't want them to do a spinal tap. And Robbie kind of makes a bit of a bold choice at the start of the episode where he takes the father, right? Because basically King's concerned that they're not agreeing to this. Robbie's like, hey, sometimes you can't do anything. You've explained it to them multiple times, but they just won't listen, they won't agree to it. He takes the father to the morgue, like the makeshift morgue with all the dead bodies, the same one that he took, there's not Jake. Took me a second, right? The same way I took Jake to. And it is kind of like a kind of a dick, unconventional move, but at the same time, he's trying to make a point of like, hey, we failed to save these people tonight, but we can maybe still save your son. But he's trying to scare the father into making this choice. And the father understandably says, you're an asshole. Even though Robbie says, yeah, I'm the asshole who's trying to save your son. He says that to himself after he leaves the room. So you kind of sympathize, obviously, with Robbie making this big play, but you also kind of get the father feeling a bit, wait, you're showing me dead bodies right now? This feels highly unethical and maybe illegal, and clearly it is illegal. He has to lie to get into the room, and then also later on, Abbott's like saying, hey, going in there when it's technically a crime scene is not cool. So I enjoyed that major play of it, but ultimately, that stuff wraps up because the dad decides that he wants to do it. He tells King, they get the procedure going, but then the mother walks in and catches them and demands they stop. And King just kind of quickly gets what she needs and says they're done, and that's it. But she's livid. The dad sort of had done this behind her back, so they're ready to have a fight. But maybe this will save the kid's life. So, you know, like, again, it leaves it off in this weird place where even the two people in this relationship can't agree on the course of action. I thought honestly the best moment of that entire plot this episode for me was early on when Robbie, before he shows the dad the bodies, he's just explained to them once again that, you know, this could get worse. You know, you need to make this choice soon, if you know, or your son might die. But when he says that, the boy's little sister's there. She's in the room with them, and she like just immediately gets this shocked look at her face and looks up at her mum and says, "Wait, he might die?" And the mum says, "No, don't worry, honey. He's just got like a worse version of what you had. He's going to be fine." Just completely lying. And I kind of loved that little moment because it was kind of like the kid's the pure version, the pure reaction to this of like, she's reacting the way you should be reacting. If anything, her daughter reacting like this should be like a giant warning sign that she's being dumb about this decision she's trying to make. She's overthinking it too much, and the daughter's like she shouldn't say anything else, but you can clearly see in her eyes, like, do it, save him, like, what are you doing? get on with it, woman. Like, you're gonna let him die. So I liked that little moment. It was a very raw moment, and it felt like for all the pondering, or the posturing, that's the word I'm looking for. All the posturing that the mum's been doing and being very uptight and saying this and this about, you know, we'll get our own physician to do this, we'll move to another hospital, this, you know, you're not touching my son, all this stuff she's doing. While she does immediately lie to her daughter, there's kind of a moment of truth here where it's like the daughter's just reacting like that is kind of revealing the truth of the moment, and the mum's still too stubborn and too like unwilling to admit that she's been wrong to change her mind here. But it's a very eye-opening little moment, I think. It's just to get that real reaction from the kid. But anyway, yeah, everyone gets some kind of wrap up, and there's obviously a lot of winding down. I'm probably best just taking the characters. You know, Robbie's got a lot, obviously. He has the most. He has a scene with Jake where Jake tells him to F off and says, "You're not my dad." He's still blaming him for what happened, which is very cold, and I get that he's young and he's needing to lash out at someone, but like, his girlfriend got shot in the chest. It's not really the doctor's fault, regardless of who the doctor is. We get a bookend, of course, to the rooftop scene from the start of the season. And notably, what I really liked about this conversation that Abbott has with him, where Abbott's the one that comes up and talks to him and says, you know, what's going on? And he cracks some jokes, of course, but Robbie breaks down a little bit, and not for the first time in the episode either. He broke down when he was making a speech to everyone before they left for the day. He broke down, in fact, the reason why he came up here was after he told the parents of the girl who died, Jake's girlfriend's parents. We don't get to see that sequence. It does this thing where we just see him go into the room and the sound's all kind of bled out aside from the music, and then we see him walk back out, and it's just kind of this heartbreaking sort of like end to the day for him, where like the worst possible like experience he has all day comes right at the end of having to explain that he couldn't save this girl's life. And that's what sends him up to the roof, right? But he has another breakdown up on the roof, and he's like, "I froze. People needed me, and I wasn't there, and I froze." And he's blaming himself for... I mean, I think you could read this for a couple of moments. Obviously, I think the main one he's reading is, or referring to, is him like collapsing and crying in the morgue room. But, you know, there's also that little moment in the surgery during this episode that I think he's also referring to. And if you go back to that episode where he was in the, you know, having his breakdown, there was a moment where people were in the surgeries going, "Where's Robbie? Where's Robbie? We need Robbie right now." He says, people needed me and I wasn't there. I messed up, I cracked, and I broke down. And he's saying this as if to say, what good am I? I can't do this anymore. And Abbott has to step in and say, yeah, for what? Like, 30 seconds? 5 minutes? Maybe 10 minutes combined for the entire day? Like, that's okay. That's normal. That is completely understandable, especially on a day like this. That is just coping with what you're going through. And I think what I liked about this speech is just how much it resonates with what we've actually seen all season. Because I think the point of this scene is like, yeah, you took a minute or two here or there to breathe, to like reset yourself, because it's like soul crushing doing this all day. But we've been watching all season. We've seen Robbie be on top of his game 98% of the time, where he's going around, he's keeping everyone else right, he's saved multiple lives, he's doing all this. It kind of ties back into the that previous point he made before about remembering the ones that you can't save way more than the ones that you do save, right? He's remembering his 3 minutes of failure today. He's remembering, and some of them, yeah, it might feel like big failures, but he's remembering and hyper focusing on these few moments where he couldn't be at his best, when he was at his best saving lives for like 98% of the day. So everything that Abbott says to him here of like, well, so what? Like, you taking a minute to like cool yourself down and needing a breather is not like saying you can't do this anymore. It's not saying you didn't help numerous people today. I think one of the things that the show really is trying to get across is how every day is like almost a breaking point for some of these characters, particularly these two older guys, relative to the others, and Robbie and Abbott, and how, yeah, like Abbott ended his shift up here, Robbie's ended his shift up here, but as Robbie says, like the last line of the episode pretty much is him saying, tomorrow's another day, and he walks off, puts his headphones back in like he did, you know, we introduced to him at the start of the season, walking to work with his earphones in, listening to music, and we end with him walking away at nighttime, listening to his music. There's a bookend quality to that, which I can appreciate, and I think the points that are being made here, it feels like the show has given us 15 hours of proof, so that everything that Abbott says to him in this scene feels ironclad. It feels like, yeah, we get him. We get exactly what he's saying here, because we've seen it all. We've seen all day of the shift. So as far as using your format, and yeah, there's a bit of a gimmick to the format, right? This real-time almost format of like, we're just going to do 15 hours over the course of a shift and show it. Right? I mean, I'm not saying it's that gimmicky, but it's a little bit of a gimmick in that you're sort of giving yourself this very strict thing to work inside of. But the reason why you do that is because you want to show how much of a gauntlet that one day is, right? That's clearly the mission statement of the show. Obviously, they want to tackle a lot of issues with the healthcare system and everything surrounding that, and even greater subjects, of course, like violence and whatnot. But like, it wants to tackle all these subjects, but a big part of this is just how many of these things they hit in the same day, and how draining it is for the people trying to hold it all together. And it's notable that as much as, like, you know, he's been butting heads with Gloria all season, Gloria comes down towards the start of this episode and says, hey, can you give me an update on what's going on down here? And Robbie lists off, like, numbers for, like, oh, the red zone had this many patients and we couldn't save this, but we saved the other whatever. The yellow zone had this, the orange zone had this, and I don't know about the green zone because I wasn't out there. You'll have to talk to them. But by the time he gets to that one thing he doesn't know, he's listed a very comprehensive list where he's like keeping all these plates spinning in his head of knowing exactly how many patients are in all these zones, how many they've saved, who need what sort of surgery. And Gloria just stands there and says, that's impressive. Like, she's in kind of awe that he's able to kind of manage all this. And then later on, refers to him and Abbott as heroes and wants them to talk at a press conference, which Robbie's like, no way, you don't want me talking to press right now. I'm at breaking point, leave me alone. But, you know, I like that. I like that, like, she's kind of like, you know what, for all the debating I have with you over, like, menial shit and, like, organizational shit and not giving you what you say you need, during nights like this, I see just how essential you are to everything going down here. So that stuff was really solid. Like that. I mean, I think to jump over to Langdon, since his intersects with Robbie quite a bit, where Langdon wants to talk to Robbie doesn't obviously want to. He does have a scene with Dana where he tries to basically find out if Dana knows why he left earlier on and say, hey, you know, do you know what's going on? And Dana tries to play it cool, you know, throws in a couple of jokes. But he says, hey, Robbie thinks I'm a drug addict. And she's like, are you? And he's like, no. And he, you know, he seems pretty confident when he's saying it, but he says he's scared. And Dana, you know, it's interesting that he goes to her for help and advice. Like, he definitely sees her as kind of the, I don't know, maybe it's a bit too generic to say the mother figure of the floor, if you will, but it kind of feels like it's showing to some extent the level of kind of like respect that she has around, and also the idea that she will have Robbie's ear, that if there's anyone here that may be able to talk him into going easier on him, or if Robbie's going to listen to anyone, it's going to be Dana, right? That's definitely the vibe that I got from this. But it did feel genuine. It did not feel like. I think the interesting thing about Langdon's whole reveal this season is that even after the fact, he did feel very frantic in the initial moments of trying to defend himself and like begging not to be sent home. But I don't think that anything since has felt like he is, I don't know, like a ticking time bomb, or like he's kind of a villain all of a sudden, or he feels like this desperate character. It feels like he's still a human being. It still kind of feels sympathetic in some way, even if he did do something wrong. I don't know. I think it's an interesting balance to what they've done with this character, where he has absolutely done something wrong. Pardon me. He's done something wrong. There's no debating that. But I think the way he is scared about it and the way he's trying to fix it. Now, you could argue that he doesn't deserve to have it be fixed. You could certainly argue he deserves to like be reported for this and go through the, everything that Robbie says to him, that your second chance is going to come with urine tests and the probation and all this, like all these different steps, and for 5 years you're going to be scrutinized until you're cleared, kind of thing. And arguably, yeah, maybe he should do all those things. Maybe that absolutely is the right course of action here. But it does feel like a big part of this show is sort of looking at the actual humans at the center of all this, and maybe kind of trying to assess what they're going through aside from what all of the rules and regulations are. Because sometimes they break rules to save lives. Like Robbie has made those calls himself before, in this episode, or in this season, I should say. So I think, again, it's making you think about how much you agree or disagree with either character in this scene. And even if you do heavily agree more with Robbie than Langdon, and I think most people probably do, I don't think you completely just look at Langdon and write him off and go, no, he's a drug addict, we can't trust him, he's going to be useless or dangerous around people. I don't know if I get that sense either. It's making me ponder a little bit more, which I guess is maybe a testament again to the character writing of the season. So that's kind of the last we see of him. Dana does have a send-off with Robbie, where Robbie's staring up at the doctor that he couldn't save during COVID, and she's like, hey, you gave him a fighting chance, and he's like, yeah, but like, I eventually like had to take away resources to try and save a girl who we also lost. And she's like, yeah, but you did your best for both of them, and the fact that it didn't work out, that doesn't mean anything. It's just the way the cookies crumbled. That's not what she said. That's why I'm phrasing it. But he says, see you Monday, and she doesn't really respond, so it's kind of left in this ambiguous note of like, is she coming back, isn't she, kind of thing. Samira is I think a very interesting character in this episode, because her whole thing here is that she's quite peppy for a lot of the episode. She's kind of like enthusiastic and smiling, and she's like raring to go for some more patients. She's like, oh, I'm fine, I'm ready to go, let's get another case. And there's a great little sequence where she like bops out of the elevator and practically runs back to the floor to get a case, when Javadi's just left in the elevator sitting there looking half dead. Like, she's so tired, she's like, she's so ready to be done with the day. But she has an exchange with Mackay, and more on Mackay in a minute and why she's still around. But Mackay is like, hey, you're running on an adrenaline high, you're going to crash soon, you're going to crash hard, and you have to try and not make your entire life revolve around this job. And Samira gets a little, like, I don't know even if offended is the right word, but she gets defensive at the very least, where she says, well, just because I'm not in a relationship and just because I don't go out socializing after the shift, that doesn't mean that I don't have a life. I just, I want to get my career to a certain point before I focus on other things. And Mackay just kind of gives in, realizing she's going to cause a conflict here if she keeps pushing, just says, sure, yeah, absolutely right. And just walks away. But sure enough, next time we see Samira, I think, she's in the bathroom crying. And not like heavily bawling, but just like having a bit of a cry. And there's a little detail here that I really liked, is that when she reaches over to get like a paper towel, I'll call it, that's the American one. Honestly, this is a weird anomaly for me to try and parse this, because the paper towel she grabs, it's in the toilet. So technically I should call it toilet roll, but toilet roll is toilet paper, right? That's the paper you have next to the toilet seat. This is not that. This looks like kitchen roll, which is what you have in the kitchen. But Americans call that paper towels. But because it's that size, I feel like I have to call it paper towels because it's not really kitchen roll. I don't know what I would call this. Like if I see this in a bathroom here, I'm like, I guess I just call it kitchen roll, even though it's not in the kitchen. I'm having an existential crisis over what we call this damn thing. Anyway, none of this is important. That's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that when she reaches over to get the paper towel, it's the last one on the roll. And you know how when you're like getting the last one on the roll and it kind of rips a little bit as it comes off the cardboard? Like, that happens. And I couldn't picture a better moment of symbolism visually for this idea of the end of the day, the long shift, and she's at the end of a rope, and she reaches over and it's the last bit of paper. I don't know. I thought that was a perfect little like visual cue in the sequence. And then she comes out and she's wiping her tears, and I think it's King who sees her and says, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, no, I'm fine." Like the day's just kind of finally catching up. And and for her to like wrap up her kind of like arc here, if you will, is that she does hang out in the park across the street at the end of the episode with the others when it's something she clearly doesn't normally do. She even lets her hair down during that scene, something I don't think we've seen all season. So it feels like, she's opening up a little bit, that maybe she has learned a lesson here that Micaiah was maybe poking at earlier in the episode, is that she is just so obsessed with work that she doesn't really try and do anything else, and maybe this is a little moment of growth, and that felt kind of nice. So I thought they handled this quite well in this episode, especially since it's not like they've been like hammering this idea home all season. I think they've definitely conveyed that she is committed to her work, and she takes it very seriously, and she's very committed. We've seen her be like very, very like focused on all of her patients throughout the season, but this idea that she's like maybe neglecting like other aspects of her life in the process, I don't know if that has come up as much. Maybe there was one scene like in the middle of the season that I've forgotten about, but it felt like it was mostly a thing in the finale. But it didn't feel like it betrayed anything. It felt quite natural to get to this point and make sense that this character might be there. So yeah, so that was Samira. Mackay, obviously we ended last episode with the handcuffs and being arrested for the bracelet, the ankle bracelet. They actually resolved this quite quickly, where Robbie comes over and Chloe vouches for her and says she was saving lives during this, and he calls over like the police officer who's been here with the other cops, like dealing with like the aftermath of the incident, and tries to say, "Hey, can you like help with this? Can you talk to these two?" Because I think Robbie says, "Wait, we're dealing with some of the biggest mass casualty incident of like we've ever had in this hospital, and you two have nothing better to do." He's like chastising the two that are arresting her. But this other cop comes over and says, "Okay, what's the problem here?" And she says, "I busted it up because it was malfunctioning during like the incident. I was trying to like help save lives." And Robbie turns and like very diplomatically twists it into, "I don't know if we could have saved that cop's life earlier on if she hadn't done this. We might have lost him if she hadn't like taken a screwdriver to that or the drill to that ankle bracelet." And very quickly, and he turns to like this other cop who's been here all night, and he's like, "Yeah, like they saved him tonight. They saved a lot of people tonight." And this cop, who's obviously higher ranking, just sort of says, "All right, you'll get this scene to first thing tomorrow." And she's like, "Yeah, I swear." She's like, "All right, take off the cuffs," and that's it. Like, but it took someone like in the police who had some say so to come over and kind of deal with it. So it felt like she was very much like almost just lost into the system of what the protocol is here in this, regardless of what the context was. And it kind of goes back to that thing I was saying earlier about the regulations, the rules, and the strict thing that's on the paper, right? The laws and all that. And then there's the actual human side of there is context, there is circumstances, there is actual reasons to, this feeds into the Langdon thing. And obviously I'm not saying her taking a drill to an ankle bracelet because it's getting in the way of literally, helping patients in a crisis is on the same level as what Langdon was doing. But I do think thematically it ties into this idea of like, hey, maybe, she should get a pass here. Like, she did this for a good reason and help save people's lives as a result. And these two people who were arresting her weren't even interested about hearing about it. They were just like, no, like, we've got a job to do and we're just going to come and do it regardless of the context. And I get why they would feel that way, but it maybe does point more towards just the problem of a system in general. Maybe a problem that can never be completely fixed, but certainly makes you think about it a little bit. So Mackay's other big thing, of course, is sort of wrapping up the plot with the teenager who had the hit list. And she kind of just comes in and asks to talk to him, and the mother leaves the room, and she kind of just like pleads, hey, you know, have you ever felt scared, like, you know, someone meant you harm? And he kind of, you know, says, oh, I think I got a taste of that today. And he's like, well, imagine feeling that every day from half the people you meet. That's what being a woman is like. And she kind of, and I will admit, I think her dialogue maybe pivots a little bit into PSA territory, right? It does feel a little bit like, you know, like a lesson. Maybe it could have been a little bit more natural. But I do like the idea of her trying to like make him empathize and saying, hey, this is what it's like to be scared. This is what it's like to feel like someone is dangerous. And you are 18 now. They're going to treat you like an adult, so you better start acting like one. So all I'm asking is that you never feel this way again, and you ask for some help. While you're you know, you can still fix this now. You can maybe understand why you wrote this list. You can come to understand why you feel this way and maybe do something about it. And, you know, she doesn't know if she's made a dent. She doesn't know if she's made a difference when she talks to Robbie after the fact. But as she's leaving work later on, she sees that there seems to be a therapist or some kind of counselor in there talking with him and his mother, suggesting that maybe he has made the one right little move. And maybe for her, that's kind of the lesson, is like, oh, bringing in the police to sort of treat him like he's already a criminal obviously pushed him possibly further down the deep end, but ultimately what worked and what maybe would have worked a little bit easier if it had been done first is trying to just connect to him a little bit and be, again, speak to him like he's a human being kind of thing. And again, it ties back into her own plot in a lot of ways. Like this idea of there is, like, she strictly just said, oh, he's even insinuated he might do something, immediately call police and have him in handcuffs. And then she was like, the police came to her and put her in handcuffs, regardless of the circumstance of what. And again, they're not one-to-one, they're not the exact same thing. But I think that experience is like, okay, maybe, you know, I was shown some leeway and some understanding. I should maybe try and go and just try and connect to him a little bit. And again, I think it mostly worked. Like, you know, maybe a little bit of the dialogue was a little bit kind of PSA, which the show's done once or twice over the course of the season. It's not been too heavy. It's mostly been fairly natural in the way it's brought stuff up. And I get why in the context of this scene it does feel that way, because she is talking to someone younger who she is literally trying to kind of educate. But, you know, it is one of those things where you have to shake it off a little bit. She talks to her son on the phone as she's leaving work, and when he says that he's watching Planet of the Apes, she says, I thought we talked about scary movies. And I thought, come on, you're Chucky's daughter. And you think Planet of the Apes is scary? What are you talking about? I mean, maybe I was watching scarier stuff at 9. I think that's the age he was. I think that's what they said he was. I was definitely watching harder stuff than Planet of the Apes at 9 years old. So, you know, yeah. Maybe cool it on the pay rate in there a little bit. Not that that's the only movie opinion that's going to be coming up in this episode. We'll get to that in a minute. So yeah, that was a lot of the senior staff. It's also worth mentioning Abbott. We find out he's missing a leg. He's actually got a prosthetic. I don't even know if you call it a prosthetic, but he's got a fake foot. And you can I never could tell throughout the entire, you know, I mean, he wasn't there the whole season, but, you know, from his few episodes where he's been active, I can never have told you that he was missing a foot. He did reference being in, like, you know, like a military style hospital at one point, or being in a war zone, to which obviously I assume is where he got this injury, where he lost his foot. But I thought that was an interesting, again, little visual of him taking it off to wipe the blood off outside. As everyone's kind of, and it's not even everyone. I kind of liked how it wasn't everyone. I like that some people have got, like, either like kids to go and get, or in King's case, a sister to go pick up. They've got stuff they need to go do, so they can't all just socialize after work. But the selection that do go across to the park, you know, like, shout out to Donnie, who's just been kind of this, like, constant face that's been there all season. And is always kind of likable when he's around, but I've barely mentioned him because he doesn't really have, like, a plot ever. He's there. He's there to be, like, another voice. He's there to be this constant, like, supporting character, and that's all fine. But Yeah, I guess we are talking about the younger characters mainly now. Javari's in this scene. Javari is invited by Mateo to come over here for the drink, which she's obviously delighted about and gets all nervous because, crush or whatever. But um, Donnie throws her a beer, and she goes, "Oh, I don't know why I took that. I'm too young. I can't drink." And Robbie says, "If you're old enough to do whatever procedure you did like 20 minutes ago, like you're old enough to drink a beer." This is a little bit funny to me though, as someone who doesn't live in the US, because the drinking age here is 18. So there is absolutely no way, shape, or form that someone who is at the stage where they've got a shift at a hospital could not drink alcohol. Like, it's impossible. But obviously the drinking age is 21. So fair enough. Like, fair enough. But it is funny when she's like, "Yeah, don't tell my mom, seriously." That was amusing. So that's kind of her thing. She's, building up a little bit of confidence with the others. King, otherwise, we see her again be kind of peppy, because it's actually the interesting bit is that when Samira does come down from her adrenaline high and she's had a little crying scene, she's talking to Donnie. And King's there, and King's still quite peppy, and they're like, "Hey, how do you have this much energy?" And she's like, "Oh, I have a fast metabolism, and I don't need that much sleep." And she just kind of walks off, and they just kind of like keep walking really slowly, like, "Okay." And it's just kind of funny because Samira was just kind of like that for like half the episode, but now she's crashed. She's like, "Okay, you know what? I get how annoying I was being." You can kind of see it on her face a little bit. It's not said, it's not dialogue, but it's a nice little touch. So King goes and picks up her sister, who we know is on the spectrum. I can't remember if she specifically said autistic, but on the spectrum. And she's picking her up, and this was a really cool little scene to me, right? As much as I'm going to make fun of something that's discussed in a second. This was a cool little scene because obviously maybe the biggest, most memorable plot for me for King throughout the season was that little couple episodes where she's talking to the woman who was taking care of her mom, and then she disappeared. But a lot of her like conversation was about getting help, and you're a carer, which means you need a break sometimes. You can't be on all the time. It'll wear you down too much. You have to have time for yourself. You have to have time to recharge, whatever. So it was very interesting seeing her go and be a carer for her sister, right? And all she's doing is picking her up and they're walking home. It's not like anything severe. But she's just had an absurdly long day. She's just had this 15-hour day at work where she's been through all this crisis. She was given more responsibility than the others because she's a year higher than the others, or 2 years higher. And she's walking with her sister, and her sister's just asking questions and saying, "Oh, you were doing this today. Why were you late?" Is, "Oh, I had to stay home at work because of your boss." "No, because there was some people got hurt." And so, "Oh, you had to help them." "We're supposed to go to a restaurant on Friday." And you can sort of tell that King's maybe a little tired, and there's a little bit of like just a second to breathe before she's like, "We can still go to a restaurant. We can still do it." And it's like, "Oh, we can get both items of food. We can get both pizza and spaghetti. We'll get spaghetti at a restaurant, and then we'll take some pizza home." And she's like, "Can we still watch a movie?" It's like, "Yeah, we can still watch a movie." But you can sort of tell as she's like saying this that, yeah, we can still watch a movie. Like, I don't know if she has enough energy to go to a restaurant and then stay up to watch a movie, but she's doing it anyway. Maybe part of the point here is that she should take some of her own advice. Maybe she is maybe a little overworked between taking care of her sister and these long days. I mean, this was a longer day than it should have been, of course, but this was a particularly long day. But it is interesting seeing her, like the moment of like. And it's not even like she's so tired that she's about to crash, or that she's like frustrated with her sister or anything like that. All I mean is that there's just a little moment on her face where you can see that it is taking a little bit of effort. It's taking a little bit of effort to keep upbeat with her sister after the day she's had. But she's doing it, which makes her likable because she's putting in the effort. But you can see that it's taking some energy. It's taking some stamina out of her to do that. So anyway, the thing that I wanted to make fun of, though, in a well-intentioned way, might I add, I'm not making fun of the person who's got the disability here. But when she says, "Yeah, we can watch a movie," she's like, "Elf?" She immediately just says "Elf," and King, like, this is the moment that would break her. I think, like, it's the moment that would break me. Like, she's a saint for going through with this, but she's like, "Yeah, or we could watch something we've not seen before." Implying that they've watched Elf repeatedly, because that's what her sister likes. And she's like, "Yeah, but Elf's so funny." And it's like, "Yeah, Elf's really funny." I have never sympathized with a character more in my life than the idea of King having to watch Elf on a regular basis to make her sister happy. I don't know. I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if I can take that much Will Ferrell, frankly. I had to watch Elf recently. We did it over in the collector's cut for Christmas season, and I don't like that movie very much. I don't like Will Ferrell, and I was like, oh, this, like, oh god, like Mel King is a saint. She is a saint for going through this, frankly. So yes. Anyway, jokes aside, I thought it was a sweet scene. It was sweet to see her with her sister. And how she does make so much effort to sort of, you know, roll with the ball, you know, go with the flow with her and kind of keep her spirits up, even though it's clearly taken a little bit of effort and energy at times to do it. And I think it really was a good payoff to those earlier plots we had with her during the season. So there's her, and then the other two that I'm going to kind of do kind of together. I mean, Whittaker doesn't have a ton to do throughout the episode, actually. He gets obviously something notable towards the end, which is okay, because to be honest, in a lot of ways, Whittaker got a lot of focus throughout the season, I think, sometimes more than some of the others. So I think it's fine that he doesn't get as much focus in the finale. But he intersects with Santos. Santos does have a plot. She probably has the biggest plot of any of the younger characters in this episode, in that she has a patient who, and she's supposed to be wrapping up for the day, but she really sticks to this one patient for an extra little bit of time because she thinks that he might be a risk to himself, that, you know, he might have tried to take something to end his life, and she is recognizing these signs even though the others aren't. She's like, hey, he's not working with any chemicals that could have done this, he's not eating anything weird that was surprising. And it turns out that she's right? She is right. This young guy is depressed. He kind of eventually admits the what he was doing. But notably, I think for the character of Santos, this is more about how she tackles this in a very different way, right? We've seen her kind of be this, like, jackhammer. Now, always well-intentioned, pretty much, right? Sometimes she's maybe a little bit too motivated to be the best, and maybe that gets a little obnoxious at times, but generally speaking, her intentions are very or well placed, right? And same here. But, you know, we've seen her maybe cross a weird line here or there. We've seen her be a little too gun-ho for certain things. Here, though, it felt like maybe a little bit of growth where she kind of realizes she has to just connect with the patient and talk to him and actually, you know, have some decent bedside manner. Where she just opens up about herself. She talks about her friend who was also a victim when she was a kid. Both her and her friend were both victims of the same person, and her friend did eventually take her life, and she, you know, shares how that made her feel, and basically talks to this young guy, trying to convince him that, you know, he should talk to someone about what he's going through, and that, you know, he shouldn't do this. And, you know, I don't really have any specific lines or anything that I want to call out. It was more just the general idea of how compassionate she was being. She reaches in and holds his hand at one point, which I'm not saying that I couldn't have seen Santos doing that, but I don't think we've seen Santos specifically in that type of moment this season. It feels like, you know, she's very sarcastic, she's very quippy, she's kind of, you know, I don't even know what, you know, she has an attitude, right? And not even like a bad attitude necessarily, but she has an attitude that she's always kind of keeping going. And it felt like here she was, again, breaking down and just doing a human connection moment, right? Breaking down wasn't the right phrase for that, but you know what I mean. She was taking down her barriers, and she was letting a human connection out to because she realized that that's what might save this guy. It's not like medicine. I mean, maybe he needs a little bit of medicine now, but that's not what really is going to save him here. What's going to save him is someone reaching out to him, potentially. So that made a lot of sense. And that's not the only one she reaches out to in the course of the episode, because she notices as she's getting ready to leave, and she's in her civvies, she notices Whittaker sort of go out past the patients at the front and go into another door in the hospital. And she follows him up to what seems to be like a fairly empty floor. And I think that, I was going to say, wait, are entire floors of a hospital this empty? It's one of the tropes that I see in a lot of old horror movies from the 80s, is that hospitals tend to be really quiet so we can have lots of spooky scenes. That said, though, I do think there was talks earlier on about how there's floors that are not really being used because they don't have enough nurses to staff them. I believe that was actually some conversations that were being had with Gloria earlier in the season, so they actually kind of set this up, so fair play to them. Maybe I'm misremembering something there, but that sounds right to me. But she basically catches Whittaker staying in one of the hospital rooms. You know, he's got earphones in, he's like dancing as he's like washing his armpits or something. I don't know. He's doing something in the bathroom, and she comes in and catches him and scares the shit out of him, which is funny because he kind of panics and falls over and gets really scared. But she basically surmises that he's between apartments. He's also between cars. He doesn't even have a car to stay in. And he's done this before. Like this is his first time doing work in the ER, but he had previously done some work in one of the other floors, and he was also staying here during that time. And she basically reaches out and says, "Hey, look, I've got a spare bedroom. If you want to, stay, if you're not going to be weird about it, kind of thing." And, she has that little attitude that she throws in there to sort of make it a little bit more like her, where she's like, "Oh, you're not like a nudist or something, are you?" And even when he says, "Oh, I can't really afford to pay for like half of the rent or whatever," she's like, "Oh, can you like clean and do like other stuff?" And he has like a line about cleaning out like a sty or whatever because he grew up on a farm. But it's it's a pleasant enough scene, and it's also kind of notable that I think that these two characters, like Whittaker was one of the people that she was constantly giving shit throughout the season. Not the only one, of course. I think Javadi got a fair bit of it as well, to be fair. But she did give him a bit of crap throughout the course of the season, and it's kind of nice to see this kind of like come together here, where oh hey, they're roommates now, and it's definitely just like an act of kindness on her part, where she's looking out for not just the patients but one of the other doctors. So it was nice. I like this as an ending. And speaking of Whittaker, actually, I really liked in the park scene where they're talking about various things. One of them says, "Well, at least you didn't get pissed on." I think they're talking to Javadi, and they laugh, and like someone says, "Oh yeah, he's probably ran away, he's never coming back," and Robbie sticks up for him and says, "Nope, that kid is tough, he will be back, just like we all will." He's and he knows more than anyone that Whittaker was there to get him back on his feet at a moment of weakness. So it was nice because he even says, actually, when Langdon reveals that someone saw him have his breakdown, he's like, "Was it Whittaker?" And I'm like, "Oh god, is Whittaker going to get in trouble because Langdon said this?" And he's like, "No, it was one of the night shift nurses. Someone else saw you. It wasn't just him." But it was nice seeing him stick up for Whittaker. It was also nice when they started laughing because he realized that this was Javadi's first ever shift. And it's like, well, that was trial by fire, but trust me, most days won't feel as bad as that. So maybe that's a good thing in the end. So yeah, a lot of character stuff to go through. This review's been a bit longer than I think a lot of them have, which is notable because I kind of rushed through the medical stuff as quickly as I could, because I knew that wasn't the interesting stuff here for the most part, other than maybe how some of the characters acted during it, which is typically what I focus on more than the actual medical part itself. But no, I liked how it wrapped up a lot of these character stories. And like I said, a lot of them get like a moment where, whether it's Mackay on the phone to her son as she's walking out, Dana walking out like sort of in this ambiguous, like, is she coming back way, or a lot of them, getting their jackets and their backpacks and they're, hanging out in the park or whatever. Like, everyone gets kind of a send-off moment either on their own or with someone else or in a group. And I think it kind of felt like, yeah, this is another day. In fact, I think the best moment to wrap up on here is whilst they're all sitting in the park, just a little detail that I hadn't mentioned yet, is like, as they're talking, an ambulance goes by, the sirens are blaring. And it's just this little reminder that even though their shift's done, like, the ER's still operating. They're still going. The night shift's in there now, and they're all working hard, and they've got, and there's almost this little thing of them looking over being like, almost as if it's weird that they're not the ones jumping to go and help whoever that is, whoever is there. This idea that, like, there is like a challenge almost to turn it off and not be there to be the one on call. Or at the very least, this idea that wheel keeps spinning no matter if you're on the wheel or not. And it's like, hey, they keep going, but we have to call it for the night and go home and actually, get some rest and maybe, come back recharged tomorrow. So No, it'll be interesting. And as far as season 2 goes, I think I'm curious about like how the dynamics will change with some of these characters, because all these young characters, it was kind of their first time meeting each other and meeting a lot of the other staff. I do wonder what it's like if they're all back next season. How much their repertoire with everyone has changed, like how much camaraderie or friendships have evolved. Has anyone started a romance in the times between seasons? Because I think it's like a year apart or something like that, or it's not exactly a year, because I know which day of the year the second season's set on, and this is not that day of the year. So, but anyway, I think it's close to a year. I think it's like 10 months or something like that. So I'm curious to see like how different that feels with everyone interacting, and how the relationships have evolved in that time. Now that they've been here a while, they maybe know some more stuff. They'll learn some things, and how that goes. Plus, is there going to be any new people in season 2? Any new like student doctors, or any doctors maybe have transferred from another hospital or something? I suspect there might be. I don't know, but we'll see. But that is my thoughts on the finale of the Pitt season 1. It was definitely a very different show than I typically look at, but the writing was very strong throughout. There's strong character things happening through, and that's the stuff that I tend to focus on a little bit more than caring about the medical details per se. Partly because remembering some of those details is impossible. I don't know how they do it. I mean, well, I do know it takes years of studying, but hey, that is the show. That is me. Thank you very much for joining me. You can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. And of course, you can like, subscribe, ding the bell, all that stuff helps out a bunch. Check out the Mail Fuzz Movies channel for all the movie podcasts. If you want to hear me talk to people about horror movies, sci-fi movies, and all other kinds of movies. Thank you very much. I'll see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?